you're so worn out, you're so burned out because you're just pouring into other people, that as a person, that's not good for you. But then the flip side of that is if you're constantly over available, and this is something that I talk about a lot in Charismedics, if you're constantly working in your business, you're not working on your business. If you're constantly in the weeds, you're not able to step back and have a very clear vision and make the decisions that are necessary for you to form your systems, implement your SOPs, and then have a strategic plan to move the direction that you want to move.
Welcome to MyMD Unscripted, where healthcare gets personal and the script gets tossed. I'm Dr. Clint Carter, ER doctor turned direct primary care freedom fighter, on a mission to challenge how our healthcare system treats patients in America. In every episode, my expert guests and I dive into real conversations about what's broken and how we can fix it by making healthcare about people, not just managing disease. It's time to rethink what healthcare should be and how we can make it better together. Welcome to the podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to the MyMD Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Clint Carter, and I would not be here today if I had known Vaughn Kohler in a previous life, because one of his main goals is keeping people from burning out. And if you guys know anything about me, burnout is a big part of how I got where I'm at. So can't wait to talk to Vaughn. He's an experienced coach and consultant. He's a former pastor, cancer survivor, multiple business entrepreneur, husband, and father of 5. So he's got a lot going on. He's got a great story to tell. So Vaughn, I'm going to let you introduce yourself properly, but I think the question I have for you to start us out is, you've lived several different lives. You've been a pastor, an entrepreneur, a cancer survivor, like we said, a coach, parent, husband. Which of these identities has shaped you the most? And with that, introduce yourself, and thanks for coming on the pod, man.
Thank you. That is a really good question. And I would say that throughout my life, I've always had a core calling, and that calling has expressed itself in different contexts.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a pastor. I've been a instructor on, the college level, and I even taught on a graduate level to seminarians. I've been a consultant, and I am a coach, writer, speaker. Those are the different contexts, but the essential calling is that I really feel like my God-given calling in life is to help people essentially create the life that they were meant to live and be the people that God made them to be. And
Nice.
yeah, and it's my jam. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy helping people get more clarity on the direction that they want to go in life. And I really enjoy helping them either discover for the first time or rediscover who they are.
Yeah.
Like, who they are, who they aspire to be, their core values, the beliefs that drive them. There's two phrases, or the two famous quotes that come to my mind, both by women. St. Catherine of Siena said, "If you are who God meant you to be, you'll set the world on fire." And then
Nice.
Dolly Parton said, "Find out who you are and do it on purpose."
Yeah. The great philosopher, Dolly Parton, man.
That's right.
She's great, man.
Catherine and St. Dolly. So,
Yeah. Amen to that.
My
love
core
that.
identity is I just like helping people understand who they are and what they're put on this earth to do. And I know that
It's
sounds a little
amazing
bit
how hard it
pretentious.
is to know who you are. And then if you were to ask people what they were put on this earth to do, wow, that would just be like paralyzingly difficult question for most people to answer.
Yeah.
And then, you get, we'll get into it, but you come into contact with some pretty highly successful folks who are having to circle back and answer these questions. So
Yeah.
how did you go from, ministry to business? What was the push there?
That's a good question. So a few years before middle life, I really started thinking and praying about it. And there were a couple different things that led me out of ministry in terms of pastoral ministry. I'd like to think that I'm still on some level ministering.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
But one was that I've always been kind of a nerd, and I like reading and I like studying and I like teaching. And really, I really started getting the urge to maybe be a teacher in a college setting.
Yeah.
Because, and you may know this if you're close to your pastor, Clint, but what's kind of a bummer about pastoral ministry is that there's a lot more administration than people think there is.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I am not an administrator. I am a teacher. I am someone who's good with meeting with people, having coffee, having good
Yeah.
conversations. So thankfully, I was just an associate pastor, so I didn't have the whole organization of the church as my responsibility. But I just really found myself again and again drawn to um, teaching and working with students and doing some sort of mentoring in a collegiate setting. And so I started thinking, well, maybe this pastoral ministry has run its course, and I'll go the direction of seeing if I can get a job as a college professor. And the other thing, quite frankly, and this may be scandalous to some of your listeners who have very strong theological convictions, but I studied it for a while, and I just felt pretty convinced and I was a Baptist pastor at the time, but I felt pretty convinced to join the Catholic Church.
Oh my God.
And so that was a
Yeah.
pretty
That
radical.
is a decent sized leap right there, man.
Yeah, it's a pretty big one. And I always like to tell people who, are people of goodwill, what's important to me at the end of the day is having a real encounter with Jesus. And
Yeah.
I do have strong convictions about church and theology, but there are good people in every denomination and every tradition.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But that all led to a massive, as you can imagine, a massive reordering of my life.
Yes.
And you know, I don't know if you've ever read Dante's Divine Comedy, but with like the Inferno and the Purgatorio,
Yes.
like that thing.
Yes. I mean, to
Well,
say
it
I'm
opens.
I'm familiar, yes. To say I've read it would be a lie.
Well, I only reference it because it opens with this basic. Basically, he says in really, really creative, sort of ancient language, I had a midlife crisis and I didn't know which way to go.
Nice.
And so
Nice.
that was kind of me. I left the pastorate, get married shortly after that, but I was older. I mean, I was close to 40 when I got married. Um,
Oh,
and a series of events took me away from Manhattan, Kansas, where I was a pastor, and I loved it. In fact, I ended up moving back. It took me and my new bride, we ended up moving from that area to St. Louis, which was a completely new area. My parents lived there, but I had never actually lived there. And it was, a major metropolitan area. And all of a sudden, I had a job very briefly at sort of a transition job at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. But all of a sudden, I'm close to 40 and I have a resume entirely for ministry.
yeah.
And I have to completely start over and reinvent my life. And it was, it was a change. And it's one of the reasons why I have a real heart for people who are going through massive changes, whether they're just going through a career change or they're going through a whole life stage transition. I have a real heart for helping people to maintain a sense of peace through that process, and not just peace, but a sense of excitement and even freedom. Like, as
Yeah.
long as I'm committed to the right things, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and I'm going to do it boldly.
I
And
imagine your know who you are, find your identity, and what you were put on this earth for had a big part in making that leap because,
yeah,
you've got to be asking yourself, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing?
yeah,
All of those things.
yeah. Well, I went through all of those, wrestled with all of those things in my mind, and then eventually, what happened is I just sort of skipped from one job to the next. I tried to be gosh, what did I try to do? I did try to get a job as a full-time job as a professor, but I kept on running into either they wouldn't respond to me at all, or they did respond to me and I didn't have a PhD, so I couldn't go that direction. And
Yep.
it was like, what am I going to do? Spend another 6 years getting a PhD? And I looked all over for different things related to colleges, and doors would not open. And it got really, really discouraging. And I finally got to the point where I'm like, well, I got to support my family, so I'm going to take whatever I can get. And I got this job as a water purification salesman. In fact, I went, like it was this some sort of machine that purified the water in your home. So
Yeah.
you sold these, right? So I went through the
Yeah.
whole training, and it was like a month-long training. And about halfway into it, I started getting jobs writing articles for a local magazine. And that was more my jam because I really enjoy
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah.
And then, but that was just like a per article basis. It wasn't a
Yeah.
full
That's
thing.
not the same as
Yeah.
having a job.
No, huh? So anyway, I finished my I finished my training and I go off on my first sales call and I'm kind of disappointed and I mean, and that's a little bit of an understatement. I'm just pretty depressed because I'm like,
Yeah.
man, I left the pastorate for this.
Yeah.
Nothing against water purification salespeople, but it's not what I had in mind at midlife,
Right.
essentially starting from an entry level sales position. And
Yeah.
so as I was driving out there, I really did just I was just felt lost. And I remember it was this very bleak day in January, February, Southern Illinois. I was driving out to do sales calls, and I really sensed this voice said, "Vaughn, what do you really want to do?" And I I said, "God, I really want to use my gifts and skills to help people, like writing, speaking, whatever interpersonal skills that I have." And literally within a minute, the phone rang, and it was the guy that ran the magazine. And I said, "Oh, hey, Bobby, how you doing?" He said, "Hey, Vaughn, I got a question for you." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Do you want to be the editor of our magazine?" I said, "Let me think about it. Yes." And
Yes.
he said, "Well, listen, we are kind of a startup, so it's not like we have this six-figure salary." He told me the salary, it was enough. It was, a modest salary, but it was a full-time salary, right?
That's right.
So I said, "All right, I'll take it." He said, "When can you start?" And I said, "As soon as I let the people know that I just went through a month of training that I'm not going to use."
Yeah.
And he said, "Can you write an article this week?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I'd like you to write an article about a local entrepreneur, multimillionaire, personal development genius, entrepreneurial genius." So great. What's his name? He said his name's Andy Frisella. And I do remember thinking, I don't know why, but this seems significant. I ended up going to write, meeting him. We really hit it off. I wrote an article about him. He said, "Man, you're a great writer." I said, "Hey, you should write a book." And he goes, I should. I'm a good writer, but he says, "I don't have the time." And I go, "Well, I actually know a guy that has a ghostwriting business." He goes, "Oh, do you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "All right, we'll put together a proposal." And so I put together a little proposal, and then I said, "Well, since I told him I had a ghostwriting business, I probably ought to form an LLC." So I started meeting with Andy. I started interviewing him and basically, writing down his thoughts, which were amazing in terms of how to build a business, how to develop as a person, how to improve your mental toughness, your vision, your courage, your discipline, all that stuff. Well, in the meantime, his media team was recording our conversations, and he told his media team to start posting his answers to my questions on social media and on Instagram and Facebook, which I know it's hard to believe, but in 2015, those were well used platforms, but not quite to the craze that they are now.
Right.
And
Right.
so he started posting these clips, and people went crazy and says, "This is such good stuff. Where's your podcast?" And he's like, "Podcasts? Only nerds have podcasts. What's a podcast? We want to write a book." And then somebody
Right.
had to tell us, "No, no, no. Podcasts are like the up and coming thing, right? You know, okay." And he's like, "Well, I guess I better start a podcast." And so he said to me, "Do you want to be my co-host? Because I mean, can I cuss on this, on this?"
Yeah,
Okay.
man.
Well,
Sure.
he said, "Vaughn, you're really good at getting shit out of me."
Yeah.
And
That's right.
I do. I tend to be a pretty good asker of questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I thought it was funny because, I'm a former Baptist pastor. This guy is an amazing guy, but I mean, he cusses like a sailor
Yeah.
and, really raw. And at the time, I had also gotten a side gig that was just, didn't pay much, but it was kind of fun. I was actually teaching seminarians how to be better communicators. So I went to the president of the seminary and I said, "Hey, I got this opportunity. Is this bad?" He says, "Why is it bad? It sounds like a great opportunity." I said, "Yeah, but the guy cusses." And he goes, "Yeah, but are you advancing immorality?" I go, "No, I'm actually think that this can help people." He said, "Yeah, well," he said, "if your conscience is clear with it, I don't think it's a big deal." And he said, I think you can really help a lot of people. And I really appreciated that feedback. Um, because it gave me I ended up having a very clear conscience about it because
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, there are worse things than cussing, right?
There are. Yeah.
So anyway, we started doing it, and within the first year or so, I mean, it just skyrocketed to the top of the Apple podcast, which back then used to be called iTunes. We were top
Yeah.
5 business and success podcast for 5 years straight. And then that kind of one thing led to the next. I started helping different people, started developing different skills. And then I eventually wanted to move back to Kansas. Andy and I continued working together in different capacities, but I was like, man, I've learned so much in the last 5 years. And it was interesting, Clint. It was like I took a lot of the things that are part of being a pastor in terms of encouraging people and guiding people and
Yeah.
kind of helping them develop as people and bringing in, soul type of things. And then along comes Andy and I integrate that with personal development and entrepreneurship. And so that's where I'm coming from. And so I ended up a couple years ago starting a business and over the years I've really begun to fine tune my approach. But I really, it really revolves around 4 central questions, which is who am I? What do I want? What am I afraid of? And how am I going to get what I want or what's next?
Yeah.
And depending on who I'm working with, can be a former NFL football player who wants to actually start his own ministry. I've worked with luxury real estate agents who wanted to make a massive transition and make a living as an artist. I've helped contractors and I've helped all sorts of different kinds of business men and women. What is funny and what is relevant to your podcast is in the last couple of years, I feel like I've been led, particularly through my business partner and friend, Alex Spinoso. I've been led to work with, and now it's primarily with people who own med spas and clinics.
Yeah.
And it is interesting because all entrepreneurs face challenges, logistical challenges, financial challenges, emotional challenges, psychological challenges. But I really do feel, and part of this, I get an inside scoop of this because my wife is a functional medicine doctor. But there's something about medicine, at least this is my take. This is something about working in medicine and working in the aesthetics where people are really coming to you with their hopes of health, their hopes of happiness, their hopes of, my wife has had a bout with mold toxicity and it's no fun.
Yeah.
And, people come to medical related entrepreneurs and they're desperate for answers. And sometimes, it's not life or death, but sometimes it's, I don't really feel good about myself. I want to lose weight. I want my skin to look better. I want some sort of aesthetic thing that's going to just make me feel better in my own skin. People put a lot of expectations on those who run medical and aesthetic businesses. And so you have the normal trials of entrepreneurship plus all that. So it's been an interesting experience working with these clinic leaders and these different doctors and NPs and stuff. And I love it. I really do. And it's been neat to figure out how I can tailor my coaching program to really meet their needs and to help them have more confidence in their decision, to help them to deal
It's
with the
it's a
expectations.
crazy environment where,
Yeah,
we those of us who cut our teeth in medicine for a while and then become business owners, the system sort of trains us that we shouldn't think about money. You're just thinking about the patient's well-being. And then when it's like time to start a business, you literally have to think about making money in the process. And there's a there's a guilt, a
mhm,
there's a dissonance inside of our souls from the training that we've received. Like, well, if I help this person and I could do it for less, shouldn't I do it for the minimum possible? I'm like, well, how many people do you want to help? I mean, if you're going to go out of business in a week, then you didn't do the maximum good with what you had. And so I think it's a fun. I know we met because you and Dr. Spinoza, who we've had on previously, started Charismedics, to a mastermind for just this thing, to help, medical entrepreneurs. And it's fun, the people in that group that are, pretty like they're just scared to make these business decisions, and they're
Yeah.
almost like, "Is it okay?"
Yeah.
I titled my podcast with Spinoza. I was like, "A medical entrepreneur can make more money, and is that okay to ask?" You know,
Yeah.
just because, is it okay? That's a fun because talk about identity statement. Am I a
Mhm.
provider? Am I a business owner? Well,
Yeah.
yes. So, I mean, like, so
Yeah.
what are some of the challenges you've had in this group? Or in maybe not in just this group because that's a limited number of folks, but just in this field in general?
I think from a practical level, well, something that is a very common challenge that has both personal repercussions and business repercussions is this idea of not being so over available to
Yeah.
patients or clients, to team members, to anybody, to where on the one hand, you're so worn out, you're so burned out because you're just pouring into other people that as a person, that's not good for you. But then the flip side of that is if you're constantly over available, and this is something Alex and I talk about a lot in Charismedics, if you're constantly working in your business, you're not working on your business.
Yeah.
If you're constantly in the weeds, you're not able to step back and have a very clear vision and make the decisions that are necessary for you to form your systems, implement your SOPs, and then have a strategic plan to move the direction that you want to move. And so a lot of what I do just from a personal development standpoint is get them to understand that it is good for them and it is good for the business for them to
Yeah.
not always be available to people and to put strict boundaries on when they're carving out time, not just to fill up their own souls, but to really think through, okay, how I want to direct this business as a whole? So that's one of the things that we talk about is just kind of dealing with that, setting the structures in place to make sure that you're being filled up and you have the time to think as you could
For
direct them.
sure.
I think people are funny, right? So you have clients and you have team members who are foisting their expectations on you. So I think a lot of times, how do you deal with criticism? How do you, when you're trying to
Yeah.
be a leader,
Yeah.
how do you make decisions and stand by them,
Yeah.
um, and power through when people are giving you blowback? And a lot of that coming back to what I was talking about, like knowing who you are,
Yep.
your
Yep. Yep.
ability to make those decisions, your ability to deal with blowback comes down to I know who I am. I know what my core values are. I make my decisions according to my core values. Doesn't mean I'm perfect, but if I'm doing something with a clear conscience, if it's ethical and consistent with my core values, and I've given this some thought,
Yeah.
and people are going to criticize me or give me blowback, tough. I'm moving forward.
I love it that there's the same people that look at my schedule and go, "What is a clarity break? You really need a whole morning off every month to go sit and think, right?" And my staff, they're killing themselves, right? We're concierge, baby. We're available. We're rocking it. One of our core values is, exceeding expectations, which sounds generic, but we literally will exceed even what you thought you wanted from us. And they're killing themselves, and they're like, "Man, we need a place this patient needs to be seen, da, 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 da." And on the schedule, you're taking a whole morning off, right? So they really don't understand it, and I don't expect them to. But at the same time, I need that time to step away and really have clarity, because those are the same folks that when I'm getting hit left, right, left, right, left, right, and then I make a decision that affects their lives, their livelihood, their daily in and out, of taking care of our patients and all that. They're like, "Well, that was the wrong decision." I'm like, "Well, which one you want? You want me to be in the weeds all the time, flying by the seat of my pants, or do you want me to take a couple steps back and try to see the whole forest for just a minute?" And there's
Absolutely.
magic to knowing who you are, why you're doing it, and then having a big picture view of what's going on while you're at the same time taking care of the tyranny of the urgent, really, really, really putting out a good product, treating your team members like the all-stars they are. All of that's important, but you can't it all breaks down if you don't have a good solid foundation.
Absolutely. And I think as you and I would agree, obviously it's important to value your team members. Obviously it's important to pour into them and to make them know that they're really appreciated. But I do think that leaders need to realize that it's not that they're better than their team members. They're
No.
just different. And the analogy that I use sometimes is, you think of about a bicycle wheel. Um, each spoke on that wheel keeps the tire inflated, right? And each member of the team is a very, very valuable spoke. But as the leader, you're the center, and you
Yeah.
have to deal with all of the spokes that are going out from the center. And so if you're not okay, the business is not okay. So it's
Correct.
not selfish for you to schedule a clarity break. In fact, I love that it's actually on the schedule. My coach,
Yeah.
Ellen Reed, always says, if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist.
Correct.
So we can say, oh, I'm going to go have a clarity break at the end of the week. But if it's not in your Google calendar or whatever you use,
It's not going to
it
happen.
doesn't exist. It's not going to happen. So I love that.
Yep.
I love that. But no, I mean, it's not an act of selfishness for you to do that. It's an act of service to your team, because worn out, frustrated, angry Clint is no good for his team.
You can ask Stephanie and my team. They know.
Yeah.
Right. So you won't get much of an argument. You won't get much of an argument there. Okay. Gosh, man, we could go so many ways. So in this case, you've talked about, your personal identity statement, knowing who you are. I guess we could expound on that more if we want, so why personal clarity fuels professional growth, right? So how that expounds upon itself.
Well, again, I like to tie this into entrepreneurship is brutal. It's there. I mean, it's funny. I almost feel like the more successful the person, the more you look behind the curtain, and you're going to see all sorts of anxiety. And, he's very forthcoming about this, but like Alex has put himself in Dr. Alex, my business partner, has put himself in the hospital multiple times for
Yes.
stress. Right. And so when I talk about clarity, not just about who you are, but what you want,
Yes.
ultimately I'm tying that to, I'm saying we should work at these things, because if you do it right, it's going to, as much as possible, it's going to minimize the anxiety, and it's going to help increase your performance. So this is the analogy that I use. Are you a sports fan?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite sport and team?
Oh, well, it used to be the Cowboys, but that's
Okay.
it's a
Yeah.
sensitive subject.
Right. So I don't even know who the coach of the Cowboys is these days. I know it used to be the
yeah.
guy. Is it still
It's not,
Mike McCarthy?
no, he's gone, and it
He's
might as well
gone.
be Jerry Jones, but yeah, you can pick
Okay.
a soul.
Well, so whoever you are as the coach of the Cowboys, you obviously, when your team, let's say God forbid, or God, may it be true that the Cowboys make the Super Bowl. If you're the coach of the Cowboys, and your team walks onto the field, you want them to be excited. You want them to be focused. You want them to be passionate, but you don't want them to be amped up. You don't
Yeah.
want them to be so excited that they're jittery. In
Yeah.
order for them to really perform at their best, they have to be calm. They have to be operating from a place of ice in their veins, playing loose, focused, yes, but really playing from a place of just solid steadiness. And so that's kind of the way I look at it in my work, is that my job is to help all of these really, really driven, passionate, ambitious entrepreneurs. I don't want to say chill out, but get to a point where you're operating from a place of peace, not panic. You're operating from a place of poise and ice in your veins. And again, a lot of that is helping people understand who they are. But then the second issue of that is to help them really understand what they want. And so, because I think that being very clear about what you want and having a very clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish, if you do that right, Clint, you are going to be able to handle the anxiety. You are going to be able to handle the overwhelm. And here's the analogy that I always use. I'll tell you a little story so the day that I was supposed to get married, I knew I was going to get a call. The day I was supposed to get married, I was up at 6:00 in the morning, phone rang. I said, "Hey, honey." And she said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'm just really nervous. I'm getting cold feet." And of course, it was my bride calling me to tell me she was getting cold feet. I'm like, all right. So I said, I'll come over and see you. So got dressed, went down to the coffee shop, got a cup of coffee. They're like, oh, you're up early. I go, yeah, I'm supposed to get married today. And they're like, you're supposed to get married? I go, well, I hope it happens. But my bride just called me and she's got cold feet. And they said, well, you seem worried, or you don't seem worried. And I go, I'm not. And then they said, why not? And I go, well, because I'm a really good storyteller. And so they kind of laughed. They go, I don't know what that means. But I went to see Kasha, and she shared her concern, and she was really nervous and everything. And her parents, she grew up. Her parents got divorced when she was little, and she didn't want that to happen. And she just, she had really high expectations for marriage, and which is good. You should. And so I just listened to her, and she was all worked up. And I mean, I think from one perspective, I could have been like, man, she's serious. She's really getting these cold feet. She's full of anxiety. She's very overwhelmed. But I said, when I was a youth pastor, I said, I took the kids on a trip to Colorado, and we went to this camp, and it had this really amazing, what do they call that? Zip line. And in order to get the zip line, you had to climb up this like 3-story, really high tower to get there. Right. And so I'm kind of afraid of heights. There's a couple other people who are afraid of heights. And we said, no, we're going to do it. So we, it's this rope ladder, and we start climbing up this tower to get to the top. And I'm getting up higher and higher. And I'm like, woo, this is really making me nervous. But I finally get to the top, and then this other girl gets to the top, Kaylee. And then Sean, our mutual friend, gets up to the top, and he looks and he's like, I can't do this. I'm like, Sean, are you kidding me? You went through all that work and you're not going to jump off? He's like, I can't do it. So he actually climbs all the way back down, which I don't know how he didn't think that was just as scary. But so Kaylee goes first. She jumps off the zip line, and then I go and I jump off, and it's amazing. And it's in Colorado. And I said to Kasha, I said, you know what? I jumped off that zip line, and all of my work was worthwhile, because the adrenaline, the excitement, the scenery, the sunrise in the distance, the rolling hills, the mountains, everything was just an awesome experience. And then I turned to her and I said, you know what? I feel like you and I are at the top of this tower, right? And then I don't know, I think it was God just gave me the ability. I said, you know what? When I look out at our life together, man, I can see an adventure. I can see us going to Charleston, South Carolina. I can see us taking trips to Europe. I can see us having our first child and our second child. And who knows how many child. I ended up with 5. And, we're doing birthdays, and we're doing graduations, and we're experiencing all these wonderful things that are part of life. And I go, and I said, honey, you're going to miss it unless you jump. And I just sat back and I listened. I kind of looked at her, and, she had tears in her eyes, and she's like, let's go. Like, I totally worked. And so what I always tell people is, like, I didn't use logic to deal with her anxiety. I cast a vision.
Yeah.
Showed her what she wanted. And you know what? It has been a ride. And as you well know, marriage has its ups and downs and its challenges, and it's all about for better or for worse. But man, it's been great. And I was able to get her to overcome her anxiety and minimize her overwhelm by casting a vision. And what I always tell entrepreneurs is, you know what? When you have a very, very clear sense of what you want, when you regularly review your vision for your personal happiness, for your relationships, for your professional success, for what you're trying to do with your clinic or your med spa, man, keep that in front of your eyes. Because if you keep that in front of your eyes, then you go, all this stuff I'm going through, it's not that big a deal. It's worth it. I'm willing to pay the price. I'm willing to put in the extra hours. I'm willing to deal with a high maintenance employee. I'm willing to have a conversation with a disgruntled client, whatever it is, whatever the struggle is, whatever the anxiety is, it's eclipsed by having a greater vision for what you really want. I'll use another analogy. Tony Robbins actually uses this analogy. He talks about how in NASCAR, there's a significant difference between rookie drivers and veteran drivers when it comes to, there's a point when you're doing the Indy 500 or whatever it is, a rookie will start what's the word? They'll start drifting toward the barrier, right? And what happens with a rookie when they start drifting toward the barrier on the outside wall is they'll freak and they'll look at the barrier. And what'll happen is their body will follow their gaze and they'll turn and they'll end up crashing.
Yeah.
Whereas a veteran, when he or she feels themselves, I'll say he because most of them are he, when he feels himself drifting, he knows that his body will follow his gaze, and he keeps his vision clearly in front of him at the center of the lane, and his body sort of naturally, it's muscle memory, it naturally corrects and he gets back on the right track. And I feel like that's what happens, is that in the day-to-day grind of entrepreneurship, we get our eyes on all of these things that cause us anxiety. And the answer for that is to get our eyes back on the vision. What are we trying to do? What is it that we really want? And if we can keep our eyes on that vision, then that minimizes, that helps us to basically go, all this is worth it. It's worth it.
I love that God sort of like held my hand through the early years when I didn't really have a ton of vision, right? It was just get out of the system, start taking care of people the right way, maybe enjoy being a doctor again, and just do the best we can. Meanwhile, I'm burnt out and depressed and have my own stuff. And so as I'm getting well, physically, mentally, emotionally, and then the practice is starting to grow, and then God sort of, not that he's not still in charge, but in a sense, he handed off the baton and he gave me the vision. And he was like, here's where we're going. Mm-hmm. At no point did Steph and I have a vision for growth. We were like, hey, we just need to get enough patients to make, almost as much as we made in the system and we'll be great. But that vision has been inspiring and encouraging. And like, we have no idea what we're doing. I mean, the main reason I'm in Charismedics is because Alex has, 80 locations or something. And I'm looking for like my next real brick and mortar, or my fourth location, if you will. And what's fun is like, I don't care that I don't know how. I've been given the vision. And there's times where my team gets crazy frustrated because they're like, but we're already so busy. And how are we going to do? I'm like, I don't know, but I know it's going to happen because that's the vision. And we're bringing on talent, we're bringing on wisdom, and we're bringing on outside eyes on our business. And we have, a business, sort of strategy, and we're moving in that direction. And then basically we're prayerfully asking God to give us the eyes to see and the ears to hear where he wants us to go. But that is the only guiding principle, because no one in my company has been where we're going. And so no one's like, no, next step we're going to do is this, and then we're going to do that. It's like, no, just waiting on what's next. And, just blindly following the vision. And there's times when we've had to learn some emotional intelligence and be okay with little discomfort in the ranks and some confusion about the vision. But we just keep over clarifying the values and the vision and the mission and our kingdom purpose. And while we're doing this, and it's been pretty fun.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting to find out what happens next. And like I told God from the very beginning, if this thing goes out of business, I'm just going to go build tree houses and I'll be perfectly happy doing that.
That's a great show. I don't know if you ever saw that show. You see that?
Yeah, no, that's how it came. I watched that show a bunch when I was burning out in the ER, and I told Steph, I was like, listen, I'm out. I don't want to be an ER doctor. I don't want to be a clinic doctor in the system. Yeah. It's a mess. I'm going to go build tree houses for a living. I can build stuff. He looks like he's having a blast.
Yeah.
So
that guy's amazing.
We did. So now I actually have a tree house that I built at our lake property.
Is that right?
It's gorgeous, man. I'll send you a picture. It's
going
to be on.
Should. Oh, it's
available. It'll be available to rent like next month. Anybody who wants to rent it out on VRBO, Airbnb. It's, the lake house is already rented out.
Where is the,
often.
how many does it, how many does it
The lake house will sleep 8 to 10, no problem, but the tree house, it's got 1 double bed in the loft up top, and it's got a kitchenette and a shower and a toilet and an outdoor shower and a living room and a giant deck and oversees the water. It's, 14, 15 foot up in the trees. It's great.
amazing.
Yeah, it's
That's
fun.
amazing. I love
But the
that.
point being is like, it's like, hey, I mean, I'm just gonna follow and we're gonna go and God's
Yeah.
blessing it. But if he ever changes his mind, I guess I'll just go build tree houses.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
fun it takes all the pressure off. I remember
Yeah.
in medical school, I was like, God, you got me in, you gotta get me out.
Yeah.
I literally can't know everything on this test. I need just
Yeah.
show me what I'm supposed to know to be a good doctor, and then what I need to know to make the grade on this test, and let's move on.
You said
And so
something
I
and
do
it's a
believe that that gives a
yeah,
lot of pressure.
absolutely. And you said something this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's very relevant to entrepreneurs and to medical anesthetic entrepreneurs in particular. What you just described, I think is a very appropriately detached attitude. Like, you know what? I'm going to give this my best shot, but if not, I'll go build treat houses. There's a certain level of almost like, how would I describe it? That our attitude should be not have to do this. It should be like, I
Yeah.
get to do this.
Yeah.
I get to do it, and I'm going to do my best shot. But one of the things that it was your attitude that kind of reminded me about something is that I think one of the best ways to really deal with anxiety, particularly when it comes to finances, when it comes to, your business, is you got to do everything with a clear conscience. You
Yes.
have to do everything according to your core values so that you can say at the end of the day, man, I can look myself in the mirror. I can feel good about myself. And I had something happen, and I'll share this with your audience. I had something happen. I mean, frankly, my number one paying client and I, who pays me a lot of money, he and I had a little bit of a falling out about 2 or 3 months ago.
Oh,
And it was a misunderstanding. But I felt like some things just were not consistent with the vision that I had for what I wanted to do, and were not consistent with my core values. And so, like, I walked away from a lot of money, multiple six figures. And I am not a multimillionaire like
yeah.
Alex. It was a significant drain of my overall income.
Yes.
And it just happened to be that at the time, my wife has some, you know, isn't it great about insurance? The stuff that can actually help you, like functional medicine, isn't usually covered. So, like, I'm shucking out all this stuff for mold toxicity. And then we had some stuff with our house that wasn't covered by insurance. So I'm like, whoa. I mean, we're fine. We're not destitute. We're not having trouble, but man, it's lean, and I was and
Yeah.
I'm someone who historically, I don't really stress about money, but it even got to the point where in the middle of the night, I felt a little flutter, and I was like, I woke up and I went up to get a glass of water, and I said to myself, well, I made a decision according to who I am, according to my core values. My conscience is clear. And I kind of said, well, Lord, I do like being generous. I do like doing nice things for people. I can't do that if I'm not making any money and if I'm barely making ends meet myself. So I just said to God, like, you got to fix this. And make a long story short, shortly thereafter, he and I came to understand that there was a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And I got back on payroll. This was last week. I got back on payroll,
Oh,
but here's the kicker. Even though I was getting back on payroll, I was like, man, but I still went 2 months without that income. So that was huge. So I was
yeah.
like, oof, that's a hit. But when the money hit the bank, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of money. And I called his wife, who's the COO, and I thought maybe there's some mistake. And she said, no, 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 we're giving you back pay. So like that, it was instantly, the problem was solved and then some. And I
Oh,
always tell people through that whole thing, the one thing that I could really hang my hat on, and the one thing that gave me a great strength and a great sense of peace was I was operating according to a clear conscience and according to core values. And I know that most of your listeners, there's going to be lean times, and there's going to be, there's going to be times where things are abundant. And through it all, you have to say, I will always conduct myself according to who I am and the core values that I maintain. And if I do that, then even in those times, you're going to minimize anxiety, because you're going to feel like I can look myself in the mirror. I can feel good about myself. I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced that an uneasy conscience and doing things that are not really who you are, they're going to mess you up. So if you get desperate, don't start compromising your integrity. Keep your integrity and trust that things are going to work out, because they will.
That's
And if
so
they
much
don't,
of what.
you can go build tree houses.
That's right, baby. If God willing, because that's the best job there is. No, man, I was probably I think my next question was gonna be, what advice would you give? I think that's a great next step for people that are trying to figure out what to do next. Is just circle back, and are you being consistent with your core values? And is your organization or your family or, how you conduct yourself, are you being consistent with your core values? And if so, just keep plowing ahead. I mean, that's what burnout really is. Burnout isn't being overworked and tired. Burnout is being asked to do something against that is wrong, or against your values, or being forced to compromise over and over and over again, to the point that like I was like, I'm just not gonna be a doctor anymore. I mean, I'm just not gonna do it. And so it's been such a blessing to watch God bless that decision. And it's not like every time you do that, it's going to, I immediately, I guess to be consistent with my values at the time, I paid $55,000 to leave the ER, paid another $150,000 to get into a freestanding ER company so that I could pay my bills, so that I could start a practice with a membership-based practice with 0 patients and no location. It's like, okay, I think we're doing the right thing. Let's go. And, there were years and years, and I still have a lot of my OG patients, some of the originals that are like, I kind of miss the old days when you were, just basically sitting around waiting on them to call. And I'm like, yeah, I don't, because I was working 2 jobs. Steph was working 2 jobs. We were barely covering payroll and our own, it's like, and they at the same time, those are the same people that they kind of miss the old days, but they're also really proud of us and what God's doing through our practice. So it's really a blessing. But
that's awesome,
man. Thank you so much. Any last thoughts? Anything else on as we close this baby down?
I'll just make a couple shameless plugs. I have a client named Morgan, and she's a great client, and she kind of does it all. She's a wife, mom, and runs a clinic in Midland, Texas. And oh man, she's going through a series where she's growing a lot, but it's really overwhelming. And she's struggled for a long time. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to put everything that I think would encourage her kind of into a letter. So I wrote a 5,000 word letter.
Oh, wow.
And I sent it to her, and she calls me. She's like, I'm sitting here with Travis, that's her husband, and she's like, Vaughn, I'm blown away. I go, what do you mean? She's like, this is so incredibly helpful. I go, really? Well, I hoped it would be, but I was like, she's like, yeah, you ought to publish this. So I did. And so it's called Overcoming Overwhelm and Overavailability Syndrome.
Nice.
And I admit that because I wrote it to a woman in business, the subtitle is A Personal Letter to a Woman in Business on How to Have More Peace, Presence, and Poise. And I've gotten some really good responses from it, but people can get a free copy of it if they go to overwhelm.vaughnkohler.com. It says it's a letter to a woman, but I think it could help anybody.
Of course.
So, and then, of course, I always want to encourage people, if you're a medical entrepreneur of any kind, to consider joining Charismedics. But no, I appreciate you. And it's CHARISMEDX, Charismedics. Join charismedics.com.
Yeah, we will definitely put the in the show notes how to connect with you via Charismedics or via personal coaching. definitely add in the letter. That's great. Morgan, by the way, is amazing. Her husband's great too. We met them I met him recently, but Morgan, she was in Charismedics for a while and she's
Yeah.
awesome. And
Yeah,
we
absolutely. She's
touched
actually
base
one of
every
our
now and then.
speakers for
So
our upcoming,
is
she's
she?
gonna we've got
Good.
a handful of people who were members who are gonna just do short little shares.
That's awesome.
So yeah. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
So,
And you guys
but I
keep
appreciate
it up,
you
man.
having me on. It's a grand old time. I had a good time talking to you, and you
Oh,
have
well, we
you know,
obviously this conversation could go on for days, but knowing the attention span of most of us, we should probably wrap it up. But
that's right.
thanks, man. Thank you so much
You
for
bet.
coming on. Thank you for what you do in Charismetics and in general for helping people find out, basically, and to paraphrase what God put them on this earth to be doing, and to if you're in God's will, you can't be wrong. So thanks, man. I
Totally.
appreciate you coming on, and have a great day.
Thanks, Clint.
Thanks for joining me today on MyMD Unscripted. I hope today's conversation opened your mind and inspired you to imagine a better path for your health and therefore life. If you found value in this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone passionate about transforming healthcare. Real change starts with real conversations, so let's keep them going. Until next time, stay well, stay curious, and never stop pushing for better.